Hey everybody, welcome back to the Coal Iron collaborative series of videos that we are making here at Coal Iron Works. My name is DelaGardelle. I'm the owner and operator of Cedarlore Forge, and I'm also the marketing director here at Coal Iron Works. And today I'm honored to have my good friend, my brother in life and craft, Laurence Coppedge, out here at the shop with me. Laurence, thank you for coming out.
Oh, you're welcome. Really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you, man. So Laurence is also I'm super grateful to have him as a patron ally, friend of mine, a part of Cedarlore Forge with me, honestly, through my Patreon page. So you get a lot of behind the scenes of my work that you see that I share with my patrons, and that's a lot of fun. Really appreciate his knowledge and what he contributes to the group as well. But today I wanted to have Laurence out because we wanted to forge some Damascus pattern welded steel. And you do amazing work, but if anybody, you guys see on his t-shirt here, Freebird Forge and the awesome logo he has, if people search your name, your brand, they're probably not going to find any website. Explain what you do, why you do it, and why you're, at least in this season of life, kind of in the learning stages. And yeah.
Yeah, I've been making blades as a hobbyist for maybe 5 years, and the Freebird Forge just came out of my own story and just fun I'm having in my garage with my kids. And it's not uncommon to have neighborhood kids or other friends of the family just come in and make a spike knife, and then I've made shields, and I've made my first sword that is very rough, but for implements of blessing for kids in our community. And so I'm a hobbyist with a 16-ton press that I absolutely love from Coal Iron. These guys have set me up well for the next step of my learning, and I'm happy to be here.
Cool, yeah, he's got a really cool 16-ton. This was back when at Coal Iron Works we were able to do a little bit more customization. We're not really able to anymore, but you got a really vibrant blue press, and we did I actually cut it out, did a custom vinyl logo of your logo right there. So it's a good looking press. But yeah, today we, like I said, are going to be forging not just some Damascus pattern welded steel in general, we're going to be specifically forging a pattern welded Sax blade. So this will be a little bit historically inspired, of course, but a little bit modern, mythic, my own take on a Sax. And the different pieces of steel that we'll be forging into one solid element to make up the blade, the different elements of steel are actually steel that I forged years ago back at the old Coal Iron Works workshop when our good friends Jimmy Juresta, who you might know here on YouTube, came out to visit, along with our good friend Zach Herberholtz of ZH Fabrications. So those guys were coming out to the old Coal Iron shop because they were scoping out the possibility of buying presses. Of course they did, and they used their Coal Iron presses on a lot of cool projects. But that day, Andy and Nate asked me to show them just some basic tips and tricks and tools of how to forge Damascus steel on a press. So I brought out some billets, and I decided to do a few different twist Damascus billets. So if you know my work or know anything about historical, especially European Viking Age blades, you'll know that a lot of those style of blades had, of course, composite twisted chevron-like patterns in a lot of those blades, and then more rare blades had what's called a wolf's tooth pattern. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I'm really stoked about it. Like I said, the steel I forged that day when Jimmy and Zach were out, and I also, here at Coal Iron, made some wolf's tooth pattern that I've yet to fuse into one solid element. So we've got each individual bar, about 5 or 6. I'm looking at it right now, and I'm going to give you guys a glimpse here in the video of what we're going to be forging together. But the next step in the process, first up, is for us to, Laurence and I are going to take each element, we're going to clean them up over on my 2x72 Beaumont KMG grinder, which I love. We're going to be cleaning all those elements so that they're nice and straight, flat and smooth, because if you've ever done any Damascus forging work, then you'll know that the best way to guarantee that you don't get cold shuts or weld flaws is to nicely clean every element, make sure you don't have gaps and voids, get it as nicely put together as possible so that you can heat it up, use a little bit of borax, and have no stress whatsoever when it comes to squishing and forge welding those elements together. I'm super honored and stoked to have my brother out here. Thank you, man, for joining me. I'm going to be putting him to work. He's never done anything like this, so this will be a lot of fun for me to teach some of my skills with him and with you guys. So thanks for tagging along, and we're about to fire up the forge. Let's get to work. So our game plan here, and to define what each element is, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different bars, each distinct and unique. And let's just go through each of them. These two cutting edge thicker bars are 1075. We've got a thin sliver of L6 in there, which should be a nice bright kind of shiny highlight. Not a historical thing you would see, but I think it'd be fun. Also gives us a little bit more meat to work with. Months back, I ground these teeth into this 1075 bar, and while the wrought iron you see here was hot, I squished the cold toothy bar into the wrought and made this nice dovetail fitting together, yeah, kind of system, this dovetail like wolf's tooth. That's what you call it. So the next element, like we mentioned, is we gotta clean every surface that's gonna come in contact with another surface. We want it to be nice, shiny, bright, and flat. So I'm gonna put Laurence to work in terms of grinding off the excess on either side of this wrought iron. We don't need it to be bubbling out as such. And it's currently the widest element. We want them to pretty much all be more or less the same width. We also need to clean up the back. I'm gonna be cleaning up the cutting edges here, and the spine are 2 twists of pattern welded steel. This is the stuff that I made the day that my good friends Zach and Jimmy came out. And so those are pretty much ready to go. Once we get all the elements cleaned up and ready to be thrown in the forge, of course, we want to hold them together so they're not just loose. And we're simply going to tack weld or MIG weld on either end, just temporarily to hold it in place so that when we are ready to get it up to heat and squish it in the press, everything will be aligned, nothing will move out of placement, and we will have a good blade to forge to shape. So that is the plan. Let's get to grinding. So we've got every element cleaned up and pretty much flush, uniform, and ready to go. They are varying thicknesses. That can be a little bit tricky, but we're gonna make it work. So the next step is for me to carefully get them as aligned and straight as possible. I'm gonna clamp them up, and then I'm going to MIG weld the ends. I'm gonna use my small MIG welder. Doesn't have to be a fancy welder. This is just, temporary tack welds to hold it in place. We're of course gonna grind those tack welds off, but it's just to hold it in place so that when we put it in the forge, nothing's gonna shift and move, and we can fuse it into one solid piece. So we've got our billet tack welded up. They're not pretty welds, but I'm a bladesmith, not a welder, so I don't feel any shame. It's totally fine. This is a very narrow billet, so this is where it's going to get tricky to make sure the billet does not buckle under its width when we press it. So we're going to be very careful. The first thing I'm going to do, which not everybody does, but I'm going to do it, is just put a little bit of WD-40 on it, and that's to burn up any oxygen in those layers. And when we get it to a certain heat, then we're going to put some borax on it. So that is a solid weld. I'm really happy with how that's turned out. What you're looking for after you've made those initial welds is any shadows, any discoloration where one piece of steel is colder than another and your lines have a clear delineation of a shadow. I'm not seeing any of that. You still can't see the pattern because each element wasn't perfectly lined up. That's okay. At this stage, you want to still weld it really, really hot, or you want to forge it really, really hot. You want to let those welds soak in the fire. But overall, really happy with it. I just want to, when it comes to forging after your first initial welds, take your time, work it really hot, be very careful, don't work it below a bright orange heat, and you should be good. properly welded. So I see if you want to get close, there's no weld flaws that are visible. We've got some slight discoloration in parts, but that's because we intentionally added some very different types of steel in the way I was grinding it. But we're gonna put it back in the forge and keep forging it out. We are going to at least start the tip area by cutting off. Now this is doing twofold things. This is, of course, helping us establish that shape, which we're gonna forge and get to the correct shape. I'm not gonna leave it at that clunky angle, but inevitably there are also weld flaws in here that we wanna get out. That's always gonna happen when it's the end of a billet. Things are not gonna cooperate perfectly, so that Sharpie line indicates where I'm going to take the angle grinder to it, and I'm going to work on beveling the blade a bit, forging it out and giving it that nice classic Anglo-Saxon broken back spine shape and flow. And once I get it more or less overall to shape, we will grind it and etch it. I should also note, as you probably have already noticed, I've cleaned up the tang a bit, did a little bit of stack removal in here, and I am going to try to forge this out a little bit more narrow, forge the perimeter in a little bit tighter, but it's shaping up pretty quick, and we'll be revealing the pattern in no time. So it's not like crazy heavy hammer blows. It's more about like middle grip of the hammer. You know, make sure that your cutting edge, as you bevel it, you're going to need to tip it forward so that the cutting edge is in contact with the anvil. And just, you know, slight hits evenly down the whole cutting edge. So hopefully give it a try. All right, and so here we are, folks. It is rough ground. You can see the other side is still rough forged, but I polished this side so that we can get a glimpse of the pattern welded steel. Now, right off the bat, bladesmiths who've done pattern welding, you're probably noticing those lines. Thankfully, those are not weld flaws. You got to remember, in that center core bar, we used wrought iron. Wrought iron is like the string cheese of the iron metal world, and you know, wrought iron naturally has a lot of porous inclusions and whatnot, and that's okay. It's still a solid piece, and actually it's going to have some really nice character. You can probably already see the wolf's tooth peeking out there, along with some of the twists on the back spine. And the wolf's tooth got stretched out a little bit more than I would have liked, but it's still wavy / wolfy. Maybe it's more of a ocean wave Sax more than it is a wolf tooth Sax. So maybe we can call it that. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I think the pattern is going to be really cool. So let us go get some vice grips to hold it in the ferric, put it in the ferric chloride. I'm going to etch it for like 30-35 minutes. Take it out, and we should have a pretty cool pattern. All right, we're gonna give this a quick etch. We're gonna give it a long etch for about 35 minutes, but I'm gonna dunk it in quickly so we can get at least a brief preview of what we got to work with. So yeah, right off the bat, bring it out. You can immediately see the steel doing its thing. I am really, really happy with that. So the camera's probably not able to pick up a ton. We can maybe bring it over here, some better lighting. But I'm very, very happy with that. You see the twists, which kind of ended up being like a chevron-like pattern. I really like that. Got the wolf's tooth. Got a nice little strip of steel delineating the cutting edges of 1075. And once we etch it a lot deeper, it's gonna look very, very lovely. All right, here is our test etched, not finished of course, but test etched, pattern welded Anglo Saxon Sax. So I'm really happy with it. Now, one thing to note, of course, if you're a bladesmith, you know this, but you might not know the fact that hardened steel etches deeper and more aggressively than, just freshly forged, unheat treated steel. So this steel has not been hardened and tempered yet. Therefore, the etch is not as deep, as aggressive, as bold and contrasty as it could be or would be. But even still, even with what you can see, I am pretty happy with it. I think it looks really cool. Like I mentioned, the wolf's tooth has turned more into kind of wavy ocean pattern. And it's still really neat. I like it a lot. I like this delineating line of high carbon L6 that we added in between the two layers of 1075 on the cutting edge. The twists have a really nice chevron-like pattern, and overall it's a very pretty piece. It'll turn into something very nice. So overall, this was a super fun piece to forge with my good friend Laurence. I think that you learned a lot, correct? Yep.
Sure did.
And so let's bring it over to the anvil, talk more about what we did, and give some final thoughts. All right, so here is the pattern-welded Anglo-Saxon Sax that we have forged. Laurence, thank you for your help. Really appreciate it.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you learned a lot.
I did. I learned a ton.
I wish he would have brought more of his work that he could showcase, because he does amazing work. He does shields and knives and swords, and like we mentioned, he teaches a lot of class to young men, fathers and sons, initiation, coming of age, things which honestly, I want to plagiarize from him. I want to do more stuff like that in my own life. Because I had an amazing dad who initiated me into masculinity with some cool events, hunting and fishing growing up. But spoiler alert, if you guys have been following me for a while, you know that I have a passion for fathers and sons and more real, genuine connections through bladesmithing. And it's a long-term dream of mine is to teach classes in person, despite the chaos of the world right now. Would love to teach some in-person classes. So this guy's teaching me just as much as I'm teaching him. So thank you for being here. And yeah, this is a cool pattern welded Sax. Of course, the blade's not finished as you saw. We next will need to grind it to shape, to perfect geometric symmetry and shape and whatnot.
Right.
And then heat treat it and polish it, etch it, and bring out that pattern even more boldly. But this is a good example of what you can do, of course, especially if you've got a Coal Ironworks press. Not gonna lie, these videos are, of course, to educate and share knowledge with you guys, but we also want to showcase the amazing tools that we have to offer at Coal Ironworks. And I know Laurence can attest to these machines. As a proud owner of one, you've been putting them to work quite a bit recently.
I have. I love my machine.
Awesome. And at the time of recording this, Laurence is still a student of the craft. He's also a teacher, like I mentioned, but he doesn't have a website, doesn't have social media, which means he's really cool. He's very jealous, honestly. That
Off the grid.
He's off the grid.
Yes.
So for now, he doesn't have any social media presence. But if he ever does, I'm going to go back to this video and add the links down below. So you'll have to look down below and tell me at the time of watching this, maybe there aren't links, or maybe if you're watching this years later, maybe he finally is sharing his work online. I hope that day is sooner than later.
We will see.
No pressure at all. But thank you again for being out here. Really appreciate it. This was fun to make. And if you guys want to follow my work, be sure and follow me on Instagram at Cedarlore. And if you want to get even more in-depth tutorials, knowledge, behind the scenes about not only the craft, but business and life, then be sure and join my tribe and community that I'm so grateful for and blessed with over on Patreon at patreon.com/Cedarlore. Amazing friends and colleagues like Laurence over there and many others. But for now, there'll be a lot more Coal Iron Works collaborations coming in the near future. So if you're not already, be sure and subscribe and like this video. It really does help us out a lot. But for now, thanks for watching. Cheers and God bless.
Thank you.